I'm going to take these off, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is going to be violently distracting.
This is what does up. Tell me, it's that time of the year and everyone's going, oh my goodness, it's Raw comedy season. It's Raw comedy season. Are you being nudged or approached to be like, hey, what's the secret? How do I trick them into getting me through the heats?
Very much so, actually. Like, I've been being nudged for months about that.
Oh, yeah?
But ever since the sign-up's open, people have been like, I've signed up for this heat. What do I do? And I don't know if I should, like, I don't feel comfortable telling people what they should be doing with comedy. Also, I don't know.
So what are you saying to them? Are you saying that? Are you saying I'm not comfortable with this? Go away?
No, I think I've just been just saying, like, be as genuine to your own voice as you can, because I think they can tell when you're trying to be what you think they're looking for. Like, it doesn't come across as, because I did that to them a bit.
You were messaging people before you did Raw to go, hey, how do I do this? Like, did you have someone like that? Or were you alone in the dark?
No, but just my Hobart heat. I think I really went in trying to tick as many like boxes as I thought they might like. Like, I went really hard on the queer stuff. I threw in some jokes about being Greek.
And I'm not Greek.
And then I also talked about moving to Scotland. I was just really trying to like have the most interesting life I could make them think I'd heard. And then I talked to Gideon afterwards and he's like, yeah, no. Because I was like, have you got any tips? He's like, lose a bit of that.
Just do less.
He didn't say do less. He just was like, some of this material is quite weak and doesn't like.
Interesting.
It feels less like good jokes and more like just hitting marks.
I see. Like, I also do this. I also do that, just to sort of go, here's all the bells and whistles that I have.
Yeah.
Rather than I don't really have a good joke attached to them.
Yeah, and I know if I'd been in a Melbourne heat, I wouldn't have gone through with the set I had.
Right, which is another thing that people like to do, where they go, did you have any fly-ins to the Hobart heat from other states? Have you encountered that before?
I don't think so, not that I know of, but maybe. I think people thought I was a fly-in after the fact because I moved to Melbourne like a month later.
I see. It was all part of the plan. Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so let's talk a little bit origin story. What was your comedy experience like before doing Raw?
I was a total newbie. Like, I was...
First gig ever?
Well, Raw was my first gig ever, but 2 years ago. Maybe 3 years ago, actually. 2022, I was in Melbourne. It was right before I left. I just entered Raw because I wanted to try comedy and I wanted to find a really supportive space. And I'd seen some open mics that were kind of violent. I was like, I can't do my first gig in front of 3 people. Well, not violent, but violent emotionally.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great way to describe it, because it is. It's like, what is it doing to my soul?
Yeah. And I was like, if I go to an open mic and it's 3 people I know, I'll never do it again. I have to get a laugh on my first gig. And I knew Raw was like a supportive group where I was like, okay, I'll do this set here. And if I think I can do it, then maybe I'll do it. And it went really well, actually, for a first gig. But I didn't do it again for like a year. And it wasn't until 2022, I was in Scotland. I was seeing somebody did comedy, so it's sort of in my sort of mind again. And I wanted to make friends, and I was like, I don't think I'm very good at entering clubs and just making chat. So this seems like a great way to start off. And I didn't do much of it, but I did do a bit of it in Edinburgh and Glasgow.
And then you can put it in the bio. It looks good. As seen in. Yeah.
I'm like, I'm cool. I do.
International comedian.
Yeah. But I was only like 10 gigs in for Raw. And I didn't expect
What was different between did you approach it differently the second time around?
I had like experimented a little bit with the style, I guess. Like, I tried to be like a really sort of personable, chatty comedian. I was like, that doesn't work.
How do you define personable and chatty in terms, like, are you putting on a different persona, you mean, of like, I'm charismatic and right. I'm gregarious.
Yeah, I was trying to have the kind of outgoing, like, you want to be friends with me. Like, I'm relatable, and it just didn't suit at all. Like, and so I'd done enough sets that I kind of knew what suited my jokes was, I think, the big difference. So when I did do it, I did seem, the way I was talking, I guess, and delivering things seemed natural enough to me.
I feel like it's sort of a little understated in throwaway, rather than selling it with that level of
Yeah.
I don't know, gregarian nature. It comes that I mean, it's okay. It's my first pod on a Monday, and I have used the word gregarious twice.
A big one.
And did you feel comfortable on stage?
No, not at all. I still don't.
Right. But what's beautiful about your style as well is that you get to make that almost a feature of your style. Like it feels like part of the persona rather than, oh no, is she uncomfortable? It's like, oh, this is a great character.
Yeah. No, I was having that chat really recently with Jameson, who was also in Raw, and she was talking to me about how she was nervous at a gig. So she went really over the top nervous. Mm-hmm. And how that really helped because like people are like, oh, she can't be that nervous. It's obviously a character. And I was like, oh, yeah, I can turn into a character.
I'm saying it to people all the time, make a bug a feature rather than trying to disguise whatever the thing might be. If you're nervous, tell us that you're nervous. If you've got sweat patches under your arms, tell us that. And like make it part of your act rather than trying to hide it away. People can smell inauthenticity so easily.
For sure. I think that's when my biggest bombs have been when I've just been trying to be something that I'm not because I thought it'd be more likable.
But having said that too, is that you'll see people that have a persona of whether we want to describe it as lower status or understated or playing that sort of what am I doing here type character. It can, like I've seen Aaron Chen bomb like when he was still doing, he was still crushing it. This wasn't like really early Aaron Chen. He's always been doing well, really, to be honest. But like some people go, oh, he's nervous. Like, no, this is the act.
Yeah.
This is part of the charm. But that is also challenging. That style of comedy will be met with some people going, oh no, are they okay? Rather than, no, this is it. So tell me about getting into the national final. How was that experience?
That was like the most anxiety-inducing month of my life because I was one of the first people picked, so I knew for a long time that I was through. And I also knew I wasn't great. Like
in terms of experience level?
Yeah. I was like, I know I have a good bit about living off grid, but that is actually all that I have kind of, and I don't have 5 minutes of it. So I had like a month where I was like, I need to just get good enough that I'm not going to embarrass myself in front of that many people. And it was
and did you feel like you accomplished that?
I did.
Oh, great.
I look back on it and I don't like the set very much and I don't want to really rewatch it, but at the time, I was really proud of what I did. And I still am, actually. I'm like, for where I was, I'm really proud of what I put forward.
Yeah, that's massive. It's a massive achievement. And I think to be able to go, it was great. I'm happy with it. Now let's move on. Because also, I think most comedy, especially early days comedy, you should be able to go, cool, that was a means to an end. I've outgrown that stuff. What's next? And you're jumping straight to solo now.
Yeah.
Which I endorse completely. But, as you've maybe heard on this podcast, so many people have different rules and ideas about what ought to be in terms of one does something like Raw and then does a split bill with 3 people, then with 2 people, then with 1 people. Or they do something like Comedy Zone. They whittle themselves down until they feel like they've earned solo. When I'm someone who goes, do solo whenever you like. It's going to be a learning experience, but why not dive in and do it? How did you feel about approaching the idea of I'm going to go solo now?
Again, kind of panic, but also I just that when I did Raw, I was like, okay, the next step I want to do is a solo show. And then everyone was like, hey, you should be going for Zone. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of like, I didn't know what Zone was at all. Like never heard
What
of
is Zone for people that don't know? How was it explained to you in this moment when you go, what is Zone?
It was explained to me as like Melbourne Comedy Festival puts like 5 comedians forward who are probably like a step above Raw to do 10 minutes for a month at Comedy Fest. So they don't have to like out of pocket the costs, which is I guess the massive benefit of being able to do a show there without taking on the financial burden. And that was kind of, and there's I think one person's an MC, but you just do I don't know if you do the same 10 minutes over and over again, but it's 5 of like some of the most exceptional acts I've seen that year with their scouting, doing their 10-minute bits and over again and sort of honing it.
The fresh faces.
Yeah, and I think they get coaching.
Yeah, they get a bit of mentoring and it is sort of seen as a rite of passage for many comedians because a lot of people have been through it. So it has this reputation. And it's funny, the role that I take on, because I love to mentor, I love to coach, I love to direct, but I will always have the footnote of like beware anyone speaking in absolutes, and the people saying you should do this is always like, who are you and why are you telling me what to do? Because there isn't any you should, and no one knows what anyone really ought to do. I think the phrase, like, and that's me talking to the listener now, is like, consider changing it to like, have you considered Comedy Zone? Have you heard of Comedy Zone? Would you like to know more? Rather than you should do this. Because a lot of people therefore then go down paths because people are very influential in much the same way that someone says you should do stand-up comedy and someone goes, okay. And then 10 years later they go, wait a minute, why am I doing this? I listened to that one person at the barbecue. Before we get into the solo show, because I'm so excited to hear more about it and it has an excellent title, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about you supporting Maria Bamford on her tour. What was that experience like?
She is the loveliest person I've ever met, hands down. I was so scared because she's like someone I look up to a lot, a comedian I love, like
world class.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. And like I'd heard of her, but it was like I never expected to be supporting someone like that this early on in my career.
How did it come about?
I was like, she got an Instagram DM and I thought it was a scam. Like I ignored it and then somebody else messaged me. And then somebody messaged her and messaged her. I was like, it's a really well organised scam. And then I like looked at the people who messaged. I was like, we have mutuals. So they're real people. And then, it was a wild experience. It was in Hobart in a big theatre. And I am not proud of the performance I did.
It's brutal to be a support act. I've seen some support acts who had to start their show while people were still, like a lot of the audience was still finding their seats and they're on stage performing to an audience who did not care at all.
Very much
so that's such a hard thing to navigate, especially when you go, oh, cool, this is such a big deal. I get to support this person, but I'm doing it on hard mode. So did you feel like you were up against it?
Because it's an audience for Maria Bamford. Like they love her comedy style. They're there for that comedy style. And then there were 2 support acts that night. So I think I was the second one. And I think they're expecting Maria after the first one.
People in the back seats are sort of going like, is this Maria now? I can't quite make her out.
She's definitely changed.
She sounds different. And did you get much time to hang out?
Yeah, we did actually. We had a lovely chat. She gave me a quote, which was...
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness
pretty
gracious.
Valuable. She super super-generous. Like,
I didn't see this on the poster. Did I miss it?
It was on there, but it's not huge.
Okay.
She was so lovely. She was her show so much about like getting paid as a comedian was a big part of it. Did you see the show?
I did see the show in Melbourne. Yeah.
We're talking about that, and she asked us how much we're getting paid for that gig. I was like, oh, this much, and she had my email, and she ended up PayPaling me at $600.
Oh, I love that.
And I was like, oh my God.
I love that. Yeah, because she's so respectful of that. And I mean, I'm trying to think about how much detail I go into. I think a different Stephanie Broadbridge has talked about this as well, but I won't blow up her spot too much. But yeah, she supported a particular gigantic comedian and did it for exposure only, and ended up having to like chase it up and go like, excuse me, like, should I not get something for this? When you're doing the maths of the audience and like, I don't think they're going even if the show hadn't sold any tickets, if you've been booked for a particular thing, not being paid anything is like crazy.
I mean, like I was already getting paid what was a decent amount for me, like more than I ever get paid, but she was very much just like,
just thinking of it in terms of what one ought to get paid, because we have such low opinions of ourselves, and pay has not changed since the 80s in stand-up comedy. But we are also grateful, especially early days. Oh, I'll do it for nothing, because of course we'd all support Maria Bamford for nothing as well.
Course,
But also we need to be able to go, well, actually, what's respectful in this situation as well. And then that means you have her email. That's so cool.
Email. She's like, you can come stay at my house if you're in LA. And I was like, I'm not going to do that, but thank you.
No, you should do that. That's the best. Like, here's the thing. I'm also the same person who goes, why would I? That's never going to happen.
Yeah.
But I have started being this, wait a minute. When people do say, come and you should stay with us, especially in places, I've got friends in LA and New York who've both said it. I'm like, I should actually do that. That's actually a huge offer.
I think I'd feel absolutely bizarre doing something like that.
Well, watch this space.
Yeah.
I want to be able to check in with you in a year's time and you
Maybe
go,
10
how
years'
is
time.
how is Maria's place? But also you can't let the invitation go too long that you're like, hey, it's me. And they're like, who
Who are you? Yeah.
It's 10 years. And you're like, oh, yeah, well, cool. All right, let's talk about the show. I want to talk about like the genesis of when you're going, I'd like to do a solo show. What is it going to be about? Put us in that moment.
It was, I've known since like for about 6 months before I even knew I was going to do a solo show this year. I've always known my first solo show was going to be about growing up off grid. Mm-hmm. That was sort of a non-question because I think it's the one thing I have that's sort of quite unique to me so far as the comedy that I've seen anyway.
All right, well, let's go down this garden path and we'll continue this thought. Let's define off-grid. So what is off-grid for the uninitiated?
Off the electricity grid, basically. So they're not connected to the power lines, but my parents kind of, like some people have that and it's still real comfy. They got a mad solar power setup or whatever. My parents didn't do that.
You had no power whatsoever?
We had one solar panel on the roof, which works great in the summer.
I'm picturing those sort of like solar panels that are on like the calculators, like the really tiny little strip just to power enough for your little Casio.
Almost. Like sometimes it felt that way. Like it was one solar panel. It powered the lights most of winter. But we also had a generator because there were times when you just didn't have the lights.
And was this your whole childhood? Like, did you have anything to compare this to, or is this is just reality?
That was reality for a long time. I think when I was around 14, we moved into town during the week because just school was a long way away. And then suddenly I was like, oh, okay.
Civilization.
Yeah, internet's not just a thing that you get at school. Like for a long time, I just thought that was a thing that schools had. A lot of all that sort of stuff.
Because give us a sense of generation as well. How old are you?
I'm 23.
Okay, so 23. So when you were 14, what year was that?
Year 8.
No, I mean, what year of the world?
2016 is 14 turning 15.
Yeah, right. Because, some people would go, oh, internet is a school thing in like 1998 or whatever, so just to contextualize you for the audience as well. And because also, these are the things that sometimes we'll casually say to an audience and then forget. And age is a big one. I feel like sometimes when the people are telling a story, they'll forget to say how old they were in the story or sometimes what the year was. And therefore, the whole story is being misimagined in the audience's mind as a result. So this feels like that M. Night Shyamalan movie, The Village, where you're sort of coming into the world and realizing that you've been, but you had not. No one had pretended to you that was what reality was. Like you weren't in. Like what was the philosophy behind living off grid?
So I don't 100% know. I think it was something that sort of just happened to my mum, like. Kind of accidentally. Like in her 20s, she bought a block of land out in the middle of nowhere for 10 grand. It's like 100 acres, 10 grand. That's crazy. She was like, of course.
Whenever someone says acres, I have no idea how to imagine what an acre is at the moment with the LA fires and people are saying how many acres are burnt, which I mean is devastating. You can see the imagery, but I can never so how big is, like, give me a comparison. Are we talking like a football oval type thing? What's an acre?
More like 20 football ovals, maybe.
Wow.
No, that's not an acre. That's 100 acres.
Yeah. That's what I meant.
What an acre is.
But enough to sort of hunt humans on if you wanted to.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's my comparison.
Very much so. I think we had squads living at the top.
You could have your own sort of Hunger Games situation if you wanted to.
Easy. Totally.
So accidental off-grid situation. Your mum gets a house, 10 grand, living in the woods. Yeah,
she was just kind of like, I'm in my 20s. I like the community out there. There was quite a community out there. Jackie's Marsh, the area that's called, used to be kind of like the hippie sort of centre of Tasmania.
Sort of commune-ish type stuff. People living together and gardening and farming. And
Totally. There's a point where there's a shared community where nobody really owned the land. There was like a whole of different houses living on the land. And that's what she came into and was like, oh, I really like this. I'm going to buy around here. At that age, she didn't necessarily plan on having kids. Her partner at the time was like very suited to that. So it was like, yeah, cool. I'm going to establish myself here. And then she ended up having kids. And then it just ended up being this hectic kind of thing where 20 years later, you're still there and you never quite established it or set it up properly before the kids. And by the time the kids came along, you didn't have quite time to have made it this big working operation. So it's been this funny little off-grid hut thing for the last 20 years. But now we're all gone. I came back and she's finally done. Like, she's done it now. This place is super functional. Suddenly there's so much power. There's internet. There's so much stuff. I'm like, so this was an option the whole time.
Oh,
like,
I feel like I'm at the end of a show right now. Yeah. Is this what you're picturing? Like, so let's talk. So let's now talk about the show as you know it in your mind. So what feels strongly to you? How do you feel strongly in terms of what you think might be in the show, the story that you're going to tell? Is it a story or is it a series of anecdotes? Tell me about it.
That is the question. I don't know if it should be a story or a series of anecdotes. What I've been thinking, well, I know, so the bulk of the show is just anecdotes about living off grid and like living in the city and like the comparisons and all that sort of stuff. And I'm trying to find a thread to tie it all together. And whether that be like a story from start to end, or just a theme that runs through the whole thing. And I have a few where I'm like self-sustainability is like a big through line, and the environment, which is also partly why my mum was doing it. She's like very anti-capitalist, very like she wanted to be self-sustainable, not have to partake in all of that. She just wanted to be able to remove and live and just have a sort of more connected to the earth kind of life. And I wanted to talk about that I was like, that is, well, not necessarily want to, but it's an option of talking about that as a concept. Also, the people who are out there do that a lot. Like there's other families out there doing similar things. And it's funny to see how different people have gone about it and how an ideal, like how this ideal you have, how it actually turns out in practice.
The Idealist. Have you seen the movie The Mosquito Coast before?
No.
It's a movie. Harrison Ford is in it, and he I think it was based on a true story, maybe just based on a book. And then I get confused in terms of what is real and what isn't. But it's him. It's River Phoenix. It's a great cast. But it's about a dad who has that idea of like, let's go, let's take the family out and let's live off grid and sort of all the stuff that comes with that. But I think there's some interesting things there. And I'm in two schools of thought when I recommend people things that are on the same themes as what they're writing about. There's both the like, I think this could be of inspiration. And then I do also understand people go, I don't want my ideas to be like sullied or confused by someone else's or get lost in them. But it's a good reference point, I think, something like Mosquito Coast. Also, have you heard about how Jewel, the singer, grew up? Do you know
No.
You're a different generation, but like Jewel also grew up off grid. She has a great episode of Mark Maron's podcast.
Yeah.
And she's someone who does like light music, poppy type stuff. And what would you sort of singer-songwriter type genre? So when I heard her story, I did not expect it to be so intense in terms of, I think it was like Alaska off grid. Oh. So fascinating. But I think that could also be interesting to see what she gravitates to in terms of what she got out of it. Because I want to now talk about, because I think this is a story show. Yeah. And what I do when I'm directing people is I throw out ideas. I just toss out ideas to see what they gravitate towards. And it's never me saying, here's what you ought to do. It's me saying, here is an option in terms of the show that I'm starting to envision as you tell it to me. Have you noticed this? Have you seen this? And even as you're just telling the story of what off-grid is and how it was still a little bit of a shambles growing up, but then coming back to the house and it all was ticking away beautifully, that has a beautiful arc to it. And it's a sort of arc that we can then try and support with what is your character also. How does your character reflect that? Or how does your mother's character, or how does your relationship with your mother reflect that in terms of something that feels shambolic turning into something that works? How does something that feels sort of pie in the sky, this feels ridiculous, then turn into something that you are surprised is actually achievable, and how does that reflect in your own philosophy? So it's looking for how themes can then harmonize with other parts of the story as well. So my next question is, what's your relationship like with your mum? Were there moments growing up where you're like, what is this? Why am I here? Was it always harmonious in the family? How's that?
My relationship with my mum's always been good. We argue, obviously, but as you do.
No, but here's the word obviously, because this is my mission for 2025 is to delete the word obviously from everyone's vocabulary, because I think it's overtaken people's vocabulary, because it also, our job is to talk and tell people stuff.
Yeah.
So when we use the word obviously, we then throw away information. So when you say we argue, I'm like, tell me more. So what subjects are you arguing about growing up? Are they little things, big things?
Just like, when I was a teenager, I just didn't like being told what to do particularly. Like,
Great, this is good stuff. This has potential. And also any paths that we go down, if you're like, I don't think we want to talk about that, that's totally fine as well. Like, I'm not going to push you into areas, nor am I, because someone also asked me the other day, I'm doing my solo show. How confessional do I have to be? How traumatic do I have to? That's what I sort of translate that to. Not at all.
Yeah.
But what I do sort of encourage people to be authentic and tell something that is going to be interesting and, fascinating to the audience as well.
Yeah. Well, actually, no, okay. Now that makes sense with so this kind of leads into the other idea that I was thinking of maybe focusing my show on a bit more, was basically, I think I don't anymore, but there was a point there where there's a bit of resentment to the upbringing because I am neurodivergent, and it meant I didn't have like the equipment basically to mask and to fit in. Like I couldn't, where all these kids, everyone learns to sort of socialize and their sense of humor and the way they communicate, so much of it comes from like social media these days. And that was all introduced when I was about year 4, like, I don't know, 9. And then everybody's making these like, all these references at school, all this stuff's being thrown out, and I just have no idea where anything's coming from. Like even the One Direction craze, I was like, who are these people? And why are we all obsessed? And I don't get it. And I don't know how you even find out about these people, because I didn't really understand TV. I didn't understand the internet. I didn't understand any of it. And that continued all the way throughout high school. And I think there's just a big thing for me when I went to uni, and I started to get, because I struggled a lot with the mental health during high school because of all that. Because I was like, I just don't know how to connect. I just can't. And I thought it was all because of the upbringing. I didn't realize at that point I was neurodivergent. And then once I realized that, all that resentment kind of fizzled away a bit. And I was like, okay, this was going to be part of me no matter what. And also, so is my mother. She's got ADHD, and I realized that is the lifestyle that really suits her and soothes that within her and sort of caters to that. But I guess the other direction which I want to take the show might be to follow that sort of story and like the nature versus nurture kind of elements to it.
Oh, this is good stuff. I'm so excited. This is really, really good. Because I've just started reading Fern Brady's book. Have you read that book?
No, I've listened to a lot of her own podcasts about it.
Yeah, because I'd recommend you check that out as well, because because she goes on the journey of discovering that she has autism, which was at the time she talks about it as Asperger's, and then it was renamed, of course. This is a stretch, but this is what I sort of jot down to sort of see what my brain can get away with, is that idea of going, blaming it on being off grid, but then I go, is there a cute language opportunity about talking about being like mentally off grid or like socially off grid, or like, trying to find like I'm trying to think about how we can then turn off grid into a metaphor or something that can apply differently. Like the whole time I thought it was a geographical thing, but it was a mental thing. Is fascinating. And I love that you use the word resentment was a thing that I wrote down in capital letters, because how much do you know about act structure? You're doing a creative writing course at the moment.
About what?
Act structure, like the 3-act structure.
Yeah.
Your beginning, middle, ends.
Yeah, I've been doing that applies a lot to playwriting, less so to stories. But yeah, I know about that.
I'll tell the listener as well, just to sort of reiterate what act structure is to me and how I like to apply it, because I like to apply it to pretty much everything I direct, because it is your arc, it is your beginning, middle, end. Act 1. What am I telling the audience? What am I introducing them to? What is my thesis is often where I gravitate in terms of like, what is the idea that I'm going to explore? And I love what we're sort of honing in on here, this nature versus nurture. And I think there's also something around that. Is this sort of lifestyle achievable? Is this lifestyle impossible, especially to someone who's neurodiverse? Is the dream achievable? because we have this image that I've painted a whole different image in my head about what this house looks like. Because at the moment, like what is the house?
I'll show you after.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, and maybe there's going to be images in the show. Have you thought about?
There is going to be.
You thought about multimedia in the show?
Yeah, I think I have to with the house, especially because it's impossible to sort of explain. Mm-hmm. Like I've tried.
And also people think stuff is made up as well.
Yeah. It mostly made out of firewood. Like my mum had
that's good. You wanted to turn it into something really combustible.
Yeah, when you're living in the middle of the bush. With like one road out, it's kind of like, oh God. And an open fire in the middle of the house. It's kind of like, what are we doing here?
What did we learn from those 3 little pigs that built those houses?
Nothing. Oh yeah, no, it was that. Basically mostly firewood. And
built by someone who is
built by my mum.
And is your mum in building? Is like, what was her background?
Nothing.
What a blank resume. A very achievable resume to write.
Which is, it's like really impressive in some ways. Like, damn, like you really, like you did this. That's kind of really cool. She's like, the structure I live in, I built it myself. It is a bit of a Frankenstein's monster of houses, and it's just made of all these random materials.
And how old would she have been when she built this?
I'm going to say from about 20 to 30.
Oh, I love
like
that you said that
because
we get to go, she was a similar age to me when she built this. We love that. We love that.
Oh, yeah. Like it's the opposite sort of progression. She grew up in Melbourne and then moved to there. And now I've done the opposite thing.
Yeah, great. Can you imagine building anything from scratch?
Not a structure.
Not as. I mean, I don't know what the other categories are.
Like an artwork or a piece of writing, sure, but I'm not getting the hammer out.
Yeah, goodness. So it's a Frankenstein house built by someone that doesn't have any experience in construction.
The roof blew off when I was about 10.
What a beautiful phrase. Yeah. It's just. There are some sentences that just don't require anything else. Like, I don't need a story attached to it. Like, that's just beautiful. Okay. So, and then what does the house look like these days?
So that initial structure's still there. So it's just one room when I was growing up. It was a really big room. It was like a lot of the houses around the area were that. People would just build this one big room and everything would be in there. And that is great for the life that my mum envisioned, which was probably just her partner, and the kid, my oldest brother. But for there's 4 of us now, and that many in one room.
There was 4 kids or 4?
4 kids.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah. So then the house has been like this ongoing sort of. It's just stretched out over the last 20 years.
Keeps being built onto.
Yeah. From about the age of about like once my little youngest brother was born, he's the youngest. I think she started to build rooms onto the house. And we'd all progressively get a room. And then people started moving out. And now it's just her in this, what is now actually really quite a big house, which is...
Or empty nester.
Yeah, it's kind of... I think she's going to turn it to Airbnb or something.
Yeah, I mean, people were really interested in that sort of off-grid. Yeah. That's a really trendy thing now. It
is.
So does the house... But like, I started picturing like... I don't know, like a windmill, water mill type thing, and like all sorts of gizmos and gadgets, Family Robinson style, or is it just bigger now? Like, does it? I don't know. For some reason, I started picturing it now as a beautiful fortress or something like that, or is it just bigger? It's
just bigger. I think it's still quite conservative to most people. Be like, oh, okay, this is very rustic. But to us, it's like, ooh, we have a PowerPoint, which is
wow,
which was like we didn't. We had one PowerPoint growing up, and everybody took turns charging things in it. And now there's one in every room.
Wow. Okay, la-di-da.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, so. There's a few hanging threads. Okay, so I'm going to talk about resentment in regards to act structure, and I'll illustrate it based on sort of what I'm hearing in an option of the show. And I'm stressing that part to you and also listeners who may consider working with me one day. It's like, Master's not going to just tell me what show to do. It's like, it just here's what I'm hearing. The thing that I always make clear to people that I work with as well is I want to make the show that you want to make, and I want to help realize your vision. So if there's any time that I pitch ideas that you feel like are way off what you are feeling, then move me accordingly as well. Yeah. Like, I feel like we're heading in a completely opposite direction. I want it to be more like this. I want it to feel more like that. Then we can find that as well. I'll often move towards what I feel like is the smoother path, which is like, for example, I was working with someone recently who was swearing a lot in their trial show, and I saw it as a defense mechanism to try and like not be vulnerable to an audience.
Yeah.
So I said to this particular person, you need to cut out all these swear words because interacting with you, I can see that you're a real sweetheart, but you're pretending to be someone else. And he had to go, yeah, that's true. But if he wanted to be like, no, I want to be a badass, then I go, all right, we can go down that path, but it's going to be it's going to be harder to pretend to be someone you're not. So Act 1 is our introduction to our own ideas, setting the scene, the who, what, where, and it's where we'll start establishing who the key characters are. At the moment, it's your mum and you. And then we'll determine and you'll determine who the other key characters are, who gets names, who gets backstories. Because some people will just be, that's my brother over there, and they might never get talked about again because he might not feed into like the bigger story. He might not need to have a name, or you might also not feel comfortable with how much you talk about other people's lives. Like that's another thing when you're talking autobiographical. So, and we also don't want to get too long-winded as well in our introduction of here's everyone you need to know if they never really feature into the larger story.
Yeah, of course.
So you Act 1, who, what, where, and also the thesis, the idea that you're going to explore. Is such a lifestyle impossible, for example? Act 2 is then when we get deeper into these things, and that's where the word resentment comes up, because the hope would be, if it's authentic to the truth, is does Steph's life start out as, oh, this is kind of nice, I like this, and then turns into resentment. So tell me about pre-resentment.
Oh, little baby Steph had a great time. Loved it.
What's that lifestyle like for little baby Steph?
Just running around the bush all the time, playing with like bows and arrows, on bikes, on making jumps, making like little fern cubbies up the forest. Like it was the best thing ever. Like I am a very practical person. I struggle to sit still and really like just do something. So being outside and having all these projects, the best thing ever for a kid. And I think it's so healthy. Like I actually stand by, if I ever had kids, I would raise them without a TV to a certain age, probably without social media to a certain age if I can. Like I do think that's the healthiest thing till you're about 10, or I'm really glad that was in me, because I think I developed a lot of skills that I wouldn't have. Like I'm quite a good artist. I think I would never have done that. A lot of I can do archery. That's not really very useful. I feel like
tell that to Katniss. She saved all of the capital.
If I ever end up in the Hunger Games, like, there's a dystopian future which might not be that far away. Where you know what, I might have some great skills. Like
so you live in a sort of Katniss, Everdeen / maybe we can also map maybe Scout from To Kill a Mockingbird onto some of this as well.
Love that book.
And I assume, did you do a bunch of reading in your childhood? Were the books available?
So much. That's really weird, actually. As a kid, I could just grind through a book so fast, and you could not like lift me out of it. It was one of those things my pet mum was always like, I'd be talking to you, trying to get your attention for hours, and you'd be like 2 meters away, and you would not hear a thing. And I was like, oh, that's wild. And I'm so different to that these days. Like, I really struggle to even to read a book.
Because you're reaching for the phone, or you're reaching for, I ought to do something else. Yeah,
I ought to be doing something. It's a really sort of struggle to sit down for that long. I've started to audiobook, and it's starting to get a little bit easy with that. But
yeah, interesting.
I've been a short story person for a few years because I feel bad if I don't read it all, but I just cannot justify the time spent sitting and reading a book to myself.
So also therefore, and I'm just pointing out what I'm seeing, is we have a character that may have some desire to get some of that lifestyle back. Like I miss it. I miss being able to disappear with a book. I miss this. I miss that. I do sometimes. Like I love going back. When I left, I was like, never ever coming back to Tassie again in my life. I hate it. I hated Tassie, and like this whole resentment had spread to the whole state and everything. I was just like, this place. And now whenever I go back, I'm like, oh, this feels amazing to just I sit for a few days and suddenly everything calms down and the thoughts slow down a bit, and I can just sit down with a book. Like the only books I've read in the last few years have been when I've been home for the holidays.
And the most writing I do, just the stuff I enjoy, actually going back to a bit of drawing, all of that suddenly all comes back again. I'm like, I have time because I can't be on my phone all of the time. It still doesn't, like if I'm not in the house.
Skylink isn't available.
Yeah.
Oh, this is really good. You know what I love about this is like we haven't even got to any of the funny stuff yet, but the show and the content in terms of what you're sharing, in terms of the origin, the source material is fascinating. The source material is fascinating, and so many people are depending on everything to be funny all of the time because underneath there isn't much substance, and you've got a lot of substance here. So I want to sort of congratulate, encourage, point that out to you to go, hey, this is already great that you have a substantial thing here, which is, and don't shy away from it, because some people do when they're trying to race to the punchline, when they go yada, 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 obviously, blah, 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 and they cut out real interesting things like that. This image of baby Steph growing up in this world where you were able to, chase butterflies and shoot your bow and arrow, very, sort of Neverland type vibes, and then wanting to come back to it. Now we move into, so because we are sort of coming to the tail end, but I want to sort of finish off what act structure means to me and what I'm hearing. And then I want to sort of hear from you in terms of this first chat about the show. What is resonating with you? What are you taking away from today? What are you maybe conflicted about too, in terms of like, oh, this isn't necessarily, and I'm going to have to think about this, but let me wrap this idea as well. So I love that you said how much you loved it, because that means in Act 1 we have to set the world up just like Pixar would. And for listeners, Pixar has a great tool called the Pixar story spine, which is actually the Ken Adams story spine. And you can see an infographic for it online if you look it up, which sort of starts with once upon a time, and we set up the ordinary world as it is. So once upon a time, Steph lived off grid every day, and this is just the regular sort of activity. Every day, Steph would chase butterflies. I've added in that detail. Shoot a bow and arrow, build cubby houses, and just live a life of freedom. And then we have the disruptor, and that is until one day. And this is what sort of leads us into Act 2, is the disruption. And for me, it feels like when you go to school and realize, I'm missing out on stuff. So what led you to a mainstream school versus, I feel like some people would expect this to be like a homeschool situation.
No, for primary school, I went to school really close by, just a little farming town school. And that didn't quite have the sort of isolating effect that high school had, because...
Similar kids?
Not super similar. Like, there's still a bit of the sort of... they were very conservative sort of backgrounds, but they're all on farms all the time. Like, they are all outside on, like, learning to farm. They're all just going to go take over their parents' farms. That is what they grew up to do. It's not that far removed.
Kids with scabby knees and dirt on their nose.
It's not, they weren't like, that's so weird. That particularly. They were just like, it was more of a parents' political thing of like affecting the way we related a bit. So there wasn't that huge sort of separation, and they were, I guess, kids who were less online than if I'd gone to school in the city. It wasn't until high school when I moved I went to school in Launceston. Well, I originally went to school to a Christian school, and that was a big struggle. But that wasn't sort of the trigger. That was, I don't think that's super relevant to the story, but maybe it was the start of me sort of like getting a bit of a protective shell. I went to a Christian school. It was around the point where I was starting to realize I was queer, and it's also the time of the gay marriage referendum.
Oh, interesting.
So every single morning we started with the school being like, you don't deserve to exist.
Whoa.
And that was sort of me being like, okay, I'm going to just kind of go inside myself and drain and sort of shut this out. And then I changed schools, and I was still in that sort of protective mode, I guess. So even like, maybe it would have been different if I'd been able to function at my best, to being like super out there, but being less reserved. But I wasn't. I was going in already kind of a bit like, woo. And then everybody's sort of like, what's cool, what you're supposed to be doing, what you're supposed to be interested in, all of that. People seem to know. And I'm shy and I'm reserved, so I'm trying to make friends, but also just have none of the cards to put forward.
And then are you then bringing that energy home to be like, hey, Mum, what gives?
Yeah, I was just bringing that. Well, I just wasn't really. Yeah, just kind of go home, lock myself in the room, be like,
Lock myself
in
the room. You have a room. You can't lock yourself in the room. That's everyone else's room.
When I was little and you get angry, you used to have to just go over to your bed and turn your head away.
Have you written that down? Is that something?
It's like a thing there. I'm like, this might be something.
That's so funny.
But no, by this point, we're living in town. I did have a room that I could lock myself in. Thankfully.
Great. Oh, okay. So, I mean, and this is the beauty of, I love to just, and this is the sort of dramaturgy side, and for the listener, dramaturgy for me is just provoking questions, is going, what about this, what about that, and going down these paths and going, ooh, this is fun, because we ended on this laugh of locking myself in my room. And even if you go, oh, well, actually, for a moment we did have a room. It's like, okay, we'll cut that because it doesn't help. It doesn't help the gag.
It's one of those things I think there's so much there that I'm like, this just isn't funny. Or it's a different show completely. Like, it could be a show, but it's not this show sometimes, I think.
Well, I think when you then added in the element of coming out, or realizing you were queer but not being out yet, and then the referendum, I did start to go, okay, how much can we pack into this show? And also, like, what is the movie version? What is the book version of this show? Because I feel like for the hour show, and listeners, you need to know it's more like 50-ish minutes, most of these shows, is, all right, we can only tell so much. And also, you're at the start of your comedy journey, so therefore I don't want you to do all the shows in one go. And we can have like illusions too, like as you say, oh, this was the start of the gay marriage debate. But then we can also go, oh, maybe that's just, I allude to it, but it doesn't become the C story in the show. Yeah. Or we realize, oh, actually, no, that is the show. Let's move it up and it becomes the B story or the A story, especially if it folds in nicely into the other themes. Or as you say, and I'll be interested to know what your thoughts are, and maybe we'll figure it out when we chat again, is that idea of, do I think this is a sort of story that's sort of told chronologically from childhood to growing up, and how it compares to my mum's life and what I felt. So Act 2, we have the disruption. Okay, so until one day, Steph goes to school and realizes that her experience is different from the people around her, and she begins to resent some of that upbringing in terms of, hey, Mum, I'm being sheltered. Hey, I'm not like the other kids. Hey, is being off grid as idyllic as I thought it could be? Maybe this lifestyle isn't the dream I thought it would be. So the picture, it's Frodo in the Shire sort of being like, maybe I need to leave this place, to seek adventure. So we have that relationship disrupted. We then have that motivation to move. And I think there's a lot of humor in that, sort of what is One Direction and sort of how you apply it to you. And Fish Out of Water is always so funny. Fish Out of Water, of someone coming and being like, what is any of these things? And trying to make friends. I think whether people are neurodivergent or not can just relate to that infinitely, of that idea of the kid in the new school. It's Mean Girls as well as that idea of coming in and being like, I'm the odd one out. How do I fit in? Act 3 is when we start to then come back and we're in the conclusion. We're in, what have we discovered? What have we learned? Have I proven the thesis? Have I not proved it? Have I discovered it? Have I not discovered it? I'm a big advocate for, I love Mike Birbiglia's work. His special that you can listen to, My Girlfriend's Boyfriend, on Spotify, starts with him saying, I'm always right and I don't believe in marriage. And then the journey that we come to at the end is that he still feels like he's always right, but he now believes in marriage, or he believes in the marriage to this one person that he met. And we see how he came to that conclusion. I've thrown a lot at you today.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping that it provides a lot of food for thought. What's going on in your mind?
Well, as far as like the Act 3 thing, that's where I'm sort of feel like I'm drawing blanks. As I'm just like, I know the connections I want to make, but I'm really struggling as to what a concluding note could be. Mm-hmm. Like, I just genuinely don't know. Like, I
wouldn't. When you say note, do you mean like message or takeaway?
Not necessarily message. Just like a lot of shows I feel I see have a line that does. Like, obviously, there's ones I love that don't. Like, I just watched Dan Rath's special. I was like, that is the funniest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And he just made a
It's just an absurdist.
Yeah. And I was like, I love that, but that's not my style. So I think I need just something that.
I think you'll discover it as you go.
Yeah. I also just don't know how to tie it up, basically.
Once again, with those sorts of things, as long as they're not preventing you from starting, I would just say start, and especially like attack the areas that you're excited to talk about, rather than going, oh, I can't set out on this journey until I know where it ends, because that will change. You could also perform the show 50 times and then go, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah.
It's actually about this, and I didn't realize. So surrendering to the process and knowing that you might perform versions of the show multiple times before you go, oh, it was right there the whole time. Like, why didn't anyone tell me? And knowing that that's okay.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we can be hobbled by not having the entire roadmap and therefore not starting the journey.
Yeah.
When what I invite people to do is like what we've done today is go, here's a potential way of getting there. And if this serves us to write the first shitty draft and go, all right, let's test this out. Let's run it. Let's chat it out and see if it is resonating the way that we want to, or going, well, it's not. Let's adjust. Let's try other things. But it means that we had stuff to try, and it means that we could do trial shows and rehearsals and be able to determine whether we're in the right direction versus, oh my God, it's opening night. I hope this is right.
Yeah, okay.
Because it's going to think that I need to have an answer, or the answer versus an answer is what's going to stop us. Yeah,
I think, I don't know, I think Act 3 for me, maybe this is like a good question for you. I feel like I want to weave in the idea of like, I feel like this feeling of like, I don't get it. I don't get what's going on all the time. Oh, it's neurodivergence. But also, everybody I know in their 20s, whether they're neurodivergent or not, they're also like, yeah, I have no idea. I don't know. Like, we're all just kind of making it up. And I think it feels like it's also a show about being in your early 20s while I'm writing it at the moment. There's so much about just being like, and I tried this and I tried that, and these all like sort of random moves that don't feel like they're particularly tied together, but all just come from the sort of desperate need to work things out or feel like you have a purpose or a direction or a drive. And I think a lot of us are just kind of grasping onto things, and sometimes I wonder if that's what comedy is. But I feel like maybe that's sort of a note for Act 3 a bit.
Steph, I need the listener to know, like, I'm leaning in like almost Little Rascals style with like my chin on my hands, because I'm so delighted by this. And I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt in the hope that you can hear what you're saying, because I suspect the listener can hear it. Because what you're describing in terms of, does anyone know what they're doing as they're making it up as they go along? Where is any of this going? That's your mum building this house.
Oh my God. You're so right. I can't believe
that's Act 3. That's Act 3 is you going,
oh God.
It's you coming back to the house and seeing it with fresh eyes.
Yeah.
And going, how does anyone do anything? How does anyone know anything? And then looking at the house and going, hey, wait a minute. My mum didn't know what she was doing, and yet it led to a house for 4 kids. It led to this, it led to that. And we get to reflect on all the wins and challenges. And sure, she didn't know what she was doing, and yet I'm still here and we're still here and this structure still stands. So maybe, and then like therefore the house then becomes a metaphor to whatever you want it to be, perseverance or improvisation or having a go, like whatever you want to. Pretty much like there's an infinite amount of things you can map a theme to in terms of what the house represents.
Yeah. That's crazy. I can't believe, like, none of that ever even tied together in my brain. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
none of this works together. This is like 3 different shows, but
It's a show.
Yeah.
It's a show. And I'm going to send you away and you're going to have a think and we're going to hopefully come back and chat more about it. And I'm excited to hear how these things sort of sit in the back of your mind and we'll start talking about bits. We'll start talking about what's funny and what little bits you've scribbled down. And I invite you to listen back and look at your notes and go, okay, let's talk about school and let's talk about these different scenic moments and what the sort of anecdote or bit could be attached to it. But also, I want people to be able to follow along the journey. So where can people find your stuff and what's the name of the show?
the show's called A Chance to Address the Amish Rumours, which is...
A Chance to Address the Amish Rumours. It's a great title.
Yeah. It's a fun title. It's one that I made it and I didn't realize you couldn't change it later.
That was just a working title.
Yes, that's funny. You know,
It's good. It's good.
I hope it gets. I think the right people hopefully will find that funny, are the people who will find me funny as well.
It's intriguing.
Yeah,
And it's a good poster.
Yeah. And I can be found on Instagram at Stephanie Hare _.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
This has been delightful.
It's been a lot of fun. I said that was a light bulb moment.
That's what I mean, to get that at the 11th hour, we love. And if I could, this is why I love doing what I do. 'Cause I get to go